The Assembly Committee on Government Affairs will come to order. Madam Secretary, please call roll.
Assemblywoman Anderson.
Present.
Assemblywoman Black.
Here.
Assemblywoman Considine.
Present.
Assemblywoman Dickman.
Here.
Assemblywoman Duran.
Here.
Assemblyman Ellison.
Present.
Assemblywoman Martinez.
Present.
Assemblyman Matthews.
Here.
Assemblyman MacArthur.
Here.
Assemblywoman Thomas.
Here.
Assemblywoman Torres.
Here.
Chair Flores.
Present. Thank you. And I apologize for saying Madam Secretary. I'm so accustomed to doing that. Thank you all. So I want to remind members to please mute your microphones if you're not speaking so that we don't get any feedback. And I want to remind you to please keep your cameras on at all times. Should you have to take off for a quick thing that's unrelated to the meeting, then obviously at that point, feel free to have to turn that off. But we expect all of us to be on here consistently paying attention and working with our presenters and folk that are going to come before this committee. I want to remind those following us virtually that a lot of us have a very unique setup right now during this virtual meeting. And sometimes some of us have things in front of us that we're looking at, actual physical copies. We have monitors to our left and right. And so you may see us looking in different directions, and it may give the appearance that we're not paying attention, but in fact we are. It's just the type of setup we have. It's just unique to every different office. The other thing I wanted to remind members of the audience, those of you wishing to participate, those of you who submit items in writing to us, we appreciate you doing that, and we encourage you to continue to do that. We ask, however, that you please submit it by no later than noon a day prior. That allows our team ample time to be able to upload it, get it scanned, distributed, do everything they have to do internally. When we get items just right before a meeting, it makes it almost impossible for us to be able to do that. So when you do submit something, we'll always make the effort to make sure that we can put it up so that everybody can see it. But worst case scenario, we'll simply post it for the following day on public comment. That way it gets posted, but that we also don't put our team in a weird situation where unfortunately they can't do it because they got it in such short notice. The agenda is relatively short for today. We're going to continue with the spirit of getting presentations to allow for the committee to become familiar with important topics and how agencies operate in this state. For those of you who have the agenda, we have two presentations scheduled for today from the Public Employees Retirement System and the Public Employees Benefits Program. At this time, if I could have broadcasting, we'll go ahead and open it up for our first presentation for today from Public Employees Retirement System. Thank you. Good morning and welcome both. If you are speaking, just wanted to notify you that I don't believe we're getting sound on our end. There we go. Thank you.
I apologize. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Tina Liss. I'm the Executive Officer of the Public Employees Retirement System. To my right is Steve Edmondson. He is the Investment Officer of the system. We will both be presenting to you. I will do the first part of the presentation. Mr. Edmondson will then finish off the presentation with the investment program. And unless there's any questions before we get started, we will go straight to our PowerPoint presentation.
Perfect, thank you.
Did you go to the next? The first slide basically answers the question, what is Nevada PERS? First and foremost, we are a constitutionally created trust fund. We are created through the Nevada Constitution, which we will cover in the next couple of slides. to provide retirement benefits to state and local government employees in the state of Nevada. We are a multiple employer, which means that we cover virtually every public employer in the state of Nevada, from the school districts to the state, to the cities, the counties, your general improvement districts. Pretty much everyone that is employed state or local government program is in our system. We are cost sharing, which means we share the cost amongst all those employers and employees, which means there's the same cost to everyone, and there's the same benefit structure to everyone, and we're a defined benefit pension plan. And what that means is the benefit is defined, so it is a lifetime benefit for the member once they retire. So that benefit is in place for however long they live in retirement. So it's a benefit that the employee cannot outlive. Now, the benefits are based on a statutory formula. So that means that the benefit structure is set by the legislature. And that is in Chapter 286. They are what we would call the plan sponsor. So the legislature tells the system what benefits to administer, and then the system is responsible for funding those benefits, paying those benefits out, and making sure that all our members and retirees have that secure retirement for when they can no longer work. One of the things that's really important to keep in mind about Nevada PERS is that we are in place of Social Security and an employer-sponsored retirement benefit. Our employees do not participate in Social Security. So that means that a career employee most likely will not have a Social Security benefit when they retire. So we're designed to really be two different programs. We're in place of Social Security, and we are in the employer-sponsored retirement benefits. You may have certain employees that from prior service have some Social Security benefits. I also would note that the federal government does offset Social Security benefits against our benefit. So even if our employees do have qualify for some Social Security benefit, it likely will be reduced by Social Security. We are one of about 10 states that does not participate in Social Security. And that is important when you look at our benefit structure and our contribution rates to make sure that you compare apples to apples, so that keeping in mind that we do not pay that 12.4% to Social Security from our employees and our employees. On the next page, we have our constitutional authority. So prior to 1996, in the Constitution was the provision that any money paid for the purpose of funding and administering a public employees retirement system is segregated and can never be used for any other purpose. So the money in the system is held for our members and beneficiaries, can never be used for any other purpose. That is also a provision in the Internal Revenue Code as well, that the money at PERS can only be used for the exclusive benefit of our members and retirees. In 1996, amendments were made to the Constitution by a vote of about 70% of the people that voted. The first one is any money paid for the purpose of funding and administering the system must not be loaned to the state or invested to purchase any obligations of the state. So that was the first portion that was added in 1996, Article 9, Section 2 of the Constitution. The next portion of the Constitution I want to talk about is our governance structure. The Constitution provides that the public employees system must be governed by a retirement board. So we have a 7-member board that is established in the Constitution, but the membership of that board is set by the legislature by statute. Currently, our 7-member board is appointed by the governor and must come from certain categories of either employer representatives, employee representatives, and we have one retiree member. And keeping in mind that because our employer representative crosses all levels of government of the state, we have local government and state government representation on our board. The next provision is that the board shall employ an executive officer, that's me, who serves at the pleasure of the board, and that we have an independent actuary. And by Constitution, the board adopts the assumptions upon which we fund the system based on the recommendations of the independent actuary. So that ensures in the Constitution that the funding of the system through the actuarial assumptions that we make is set by the board. Chapter 286, also in keeping with the constitutional provision, sets us up with a certain level of autonomy from any other level of government other than the legislature. We are relatively independent of the executive branch of state government or the executive branch of any other level of government by design, because we do function as the system for all levels of government. And we want to make sure that each level of government has the same representation at the system. We do have an interim retirement and benefits committee of the legislature that we report to typically twice during each interim session. But otherwise, we are set up to be somewhat independent. We are exempt from the Budget Act, except for certain provisions. So for instance, our budget goes to the legislature for approval, but it does not go through executive branch for approval. It goes to the executive branch for information only. In addition, our funding is through per capita debits from the trust fund. So we are not funded through general funds, but rather we are funded through the trust fund itself. Next, I just want to cover the mission that the legislature has given us. This mission has been in place virtually unchanged since we were created in 1947. And we were created in 1947 because of the Social Security issue and the fact that public employees in the state of Nevada virtually had no retirement program. And that created an instance of what they called in the 1940s of hidden pensioners, which was public employees who were unable to retire because of the lack of Social Security and the lack of a retirement program. So the mission that we've had for decades is to provide public workers and their dependents with a retirement program that provides a reasonable base income for retirement or periods for which disability has removed the worker's earning capacity. The second portion of the mission is to encourage those workers to enter into and remain in government service for such periods of time to give the public employers in the state of Nevada the full benefit of their training and experience. This is really an important tool for our employers to attract and retain good employees. It is very expensive to train a lot of public employees. And so hopefully our benefit is being used by the employers to attract and retain those employees. The third portion of this mission is to provide an orderly method of promoting and maintaining a high level of service to the public through an equitable separation procedure available to employees at retirement or upon becoming disabled. And that's where we want to make sure that you can have that orderly transition. You can have the promotion up in the ranks of your newer employees as well by being able to retire out those who by age or disability, it is in their best interest to then be able to retire. The next slide shows you really the multiple employer cost sharing structure of our system. On the right-hand side, you can see we have 111,815 active members. So those are all the active employees that are contributing to the retirement system at this time, well, actually as of June 30 of 2020. So our employees pay 1/2 of the contribution rate to the system, either through a direct deduction from their paycheck of half the contribution rate or by a salary reduction or in lieu of a pay increase that they're foregoing. So our employees pay half. So half of that circle you can see is the employee's share of the contribution. The other half represents our employers. We have approximately 215 public employers that participate in our system. You can see the largest of those employers is the Clark County School District. And so that kind of represents their piece of the pie or their share of our cost sharing structure. The next largest is the state of Nevada. That is minus the university system, who reports to us separately. So the second largest employer, state of Nevada, the third largest employer is Clark County, then Washoe County School District, then Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. And then you'll see that slice for the remaining 210 public employers have the remaining membership of our system. So that kind of shows you how our membership is broken down and gives you a little bit of the flavor as to why the legislature created us to be somewhat independent of the state executive branch, because of course we serve all those levels of government. Just real briefly, our regular fund membership, we have two funds. The regular fund which is everyone that participates that is not in a approved police officer or firefighter position. The regular fund, as of June 30, 2020, had 98,228 members. That was up from 96,072 members from the prior year, June 30, 2019. You can see the average age is 45.7, which did not change from the prior year. The average years of service was 9.7, which also did not change from the prior year. That accounts a little bit for people retiring and new people coming in. That average age just didn't change over the last year. The average annual salary changed from 52,000 to approximately 53,000 from 2019 to 2020. This is the salary that our average salary from the regular fund, and this includes their retirement contribution. So this is before their retirement contributions have been deducted. The next slide shows our police fire membership. So the police fire fund was created for the purpose of ensuring that the public has a youthful and vigorous frontline public safety workforce to protect the public from physical harm. So to be clear, the reason for the police fire fund is the benefit to the public of having that youthful and vigorous frontline public safety force. Sometimes it gets confused that the police fire fund was created to reward our police fire members for hazardous duty, but that actually is not the reason the legislature created the system, the separation for the police fire fund. The main difference for the police fire fund is the early retirement feature for the police fire folks. And that is, again, so that we can maintain the more youthful and vigorous frontline public safety force. So because of their early retirement feature, when they obviously when members retire earlier, we are tending to pay their benefits for longer periods of time, which makes their benefit structure a little bit more expensive than the regular fund, and that is reflected in their contribution rates. You will also see that it's a much smaller piece of the retirement system, this police fire side. As of June 30, 2020, it had 13,587 members. And you can also see that the purpose of the fund, that being the more youthful workforce, in the average age of 39.5 for the police fire fund, which actually is a little bit down from 39.8 June 30 of 2019. The average years of service also down a little bit from 2019. You will see the average annual salary in the police fire fund is significantly higher than the regular fund. And that would be where you would see the reward, in essence, or compensation, if you will, for the more hazardous duty that the police fire members may have. So that's where you see the differences. And because obviously they have the higher salary, you will tend to see higher benefits in the police fire side, because our benefits are based on years of service and the members' average compensation during their working career. The next slide gives you a taste of our benefit recipients. We currently pay, or as of June 30 of last year, 72,741 benefit recipients a monthly benefit. Of those, 63,376 are benefits on account of the regular fund, and 9,365 on account of the police fire fund. We have broken it by the different categories that we pay. We have service retirees, which is the lion's share of the liabilities of the system. So the service retirees would be those that you would typically think of coming out of our system. They work their career, they meet their requirements to retire, and they retire and take that service retirement. You can see in the regular fund that average benefit is monthly 3,136. The average age of those retirees at this point is 70.4. And keeping in mind that these, for the most part, are people that will not receive Social Security or will receive reduced Social Security. We also have a disability program where members can draw their benefits before reaching the required age for service retirement if they meet the requirements for a disability retirement. That is an earned benefit, so there is no floor benefit or benefit that they attain on account of being disabled. Their benefit is calculated exactly the same, which means it is whatever they earned. It just allows them, because of that disability, to collect it at an earlier age. You can see we have 2,467 disability retirees in the regular fund. You can see a lower average age because of the disability retirement requirements, and also a lower average benefit because they have had a shortened career and didn't have as much time to attain the higher level of a benefit. The beneficiary category is where our service retirees or disability retirees can choose to take a reduced benefit. So they pay for their own beneficiary coverage. They can take a reduced benefit, and then when they pass away, they can name one person to cover for the remainder of that person's life. You can see we have about 4,500 beneficiaries that we're paying from the regular fund, and survivors or those eligible survivors of public employees who have passed away prior to retirement. So on the police fire side, you can see the same categories. You can see that the police fire benefits tend to be somewhat higher. That's pretty much a function of their higher salaries. And also the police fire do tend to have a little bit more service credit than the average member at time of retirement. So the next slide shows a little bit about how we fund the benefits. The benefits, as we noted, are lifetime benefits based on a member's service credit, average compensation, and age at retirement. So the cost of the benefit is that ultimately that we will have to pay. We don't know what that's going to be because we don't know how long each individual person is going to live. We don't know precisely what their average compensation or their salary will be at time of retirement. So we are funding a benefit really that relies on assumptions as to how long people will live, when people will retire, how much service credit they will have when they retire, what their salary is when they retire. So we make a lot of assumptions to determine what those benefit costs are. But the benefit costs are dependent on the plan design. So the plan design is what determines ultimately what those benefits cost, along with those other features as in, how long our people will live and that sort of thing. So the benefit design itself creates what the cost will be, and that is set by the legislature. The legislature does set what those benefits are based on our mission. So what will be that reasonable base income for our members to live comfortably in retirement? So when we make those estimates of what those benefit costs will be, we then have two ways that we fund that benefit. So we have contributions. So employees and employers pre-fund those benefits. So day one, when a member starts working, they and their employer make contributions to us based on what our actuary says we will need to fund their benefit out into the future. So we have those contributions. And then we take those contributions, and Mr. Edmondson, our investment officer, has established the investment program that will then invest those contributions. The majority of the benefits that we pay come from the investment return itself. The contributions kind of prime that, but the investment return is where the majority of the benefits will come from. Now on the next page, we'll show you just briefly our funded ratio. And the funded ratio basically tells you how much of assets do we have on hand today to pay those benefits that we will owe out into the future. This is one measure of the health and retirement system. There are many other measures. What's important is to look at the trends, and also to keep in mind is this is for benefits that we don't owe necessarily today, tomorrow, or the next day, but these are benefits that we owe out decades from now to all our members that are currently employed and our retirees that are retired. And you can see we've given you the values of what our assets are as compared to our long-term estimated liabilities from 2011 to 2020. And what you can see generally is the trend going up. And so we, the trend of our funded ratio is really a good news, and the kind of slow and steady wins the race, that we don't want to see big fluctuations on the funded ratio up or down, because then that really affects our members and employers as to how the contributions are being made. So this is really a good news story in the fact that we're making that slow and steady progress on the funding for the future benefits to all of our members and retirees. And the last part I'm going to talk about before I turn it over to Mr. Edmondson is just to show you a representation of the growth of the assets versus the growth of what we call the unfunded liability. That is the amount that we're paying on to make sure we have those assets on hand to pay the long-term liabilities. So the black bar on this are the actuarial value of the assets, and you can see the steady growth of those assets while we are paying out our benefits. So because of that pre-funding, we have the money to pay out those benefits, and our assets, because of the investment return, the contributions that are religiously paid by both our employers and our employees, the assets are growing. And you can see the unfunded liability bar down there is fairly steady and not really growing quite at the same rate as the assets. So that just kind of gives you the visual representation of the assets versus the unfunded liability. And with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Edmondson to talk about our investment strategy.
Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Steve Edmondson. I'm the investment officer of Nevada PERS, and I'm jumping in at this point of the presentation to provide a summary level overview of the investment program at Nevada PERS, including investment return data through the most recent fiscal year end, and a summary of Nevada PERS investment strategy, which is depicted on the pie chart of the provided material. Nevada PERS investment program was $46.6 billion in assets as of June 30, 2020. And Nevada PERS investment program is fairly well known throughout the institutional investment world as being the simple fund. And when I say simple, I mean that Nevada PERS investment structure is more of a traditional approach over the last couple decades, and really more over the last 10, 15 years. Institutional investment portfolios and endowments, public pension funds have grown increasingly complex. And Nevada PERS approach, we've actually kind of distilled the program down to its most simple version that we have today, which really emphasizes an allocation to high quality, large cap, developed market in United States large capitalization stocks. Our bond allocation is 100% US government treasury bonds, which is designed to offset the volatility that's created by or affiliated with owning equity. And then we do have a 12% target allocation to private market assets. And in that allocation is a 6% dedicated, or a 6% target allocation to private real estate and a 6% target allocation to private equity. Now, if you were going to look at, say, the median or the average public pension fund or university endowment investment portfolio, and we put their similar pie chart up on the screen, what you would see is a pie chart with a lot more colors, and you'd see things like hedge funds, commodities, portable alpha, high yield bonds, etc. A lot more complication. And so how did we get to this simple version that we employ here today at Nevada PERS? Well, first and foremost, as we built this program out, we looked at the evidence, and ultimately history told us that we could build an investment portfolio in a traditional manner with a very simple approach that could ultimately be competitive over time. And in addition to that, we sat down and decided, what is our core competency here at Nevada PERS, and where do we think that we have a competitive advantage relative to the rest of the universe of institutional investors out there. And ultimately, what we determined was that we wanted to focus on the things that we knew that we have control over. Specifically, we can be disciplined. We can spend a lot of time focusing on how we respond to markets as rather than how we are going to predict markets. We didn't think that we necessarily had a specific advantage in our ability to predict the future. However, we do know that we have the ability to be disciplined and to be patient. And in addition to that, one of the things that we know we have control over are ultimately the costs of the program. So we spend a lot of time trying to keep our investment costs as low as possible. And the simple portfolio design that we've put together helps facilitate that process. We're 100% indexed across all public markets, which is unique in the industry. And by eliminating some of the more complex and esoteric strategies available to investors in the marketplace, we're able to keep our fees amongst the lowest in the industry. I don't have raw data that specifically says Nevada PERS is the lowest fee investment program in the public fund universe. However, I do know that we are among the lowest and possibly the lowest in the industry. Nevada PERS annual investment costs are 12 basis points of total fund assets. That's relative to the median large public pension fund, which fees are roughly 53 basis points. So every year, the way that we see it is we start the year with roughly a 40 basis point advantage simply by keeping our costs under control. Now, to put that into perspective, PERS investment program ended the last fiscal year with a little over $46.5 billion in assets. And that 40 basis point fee advantage at that asset level equates to approximately $190 million a year in fee savings over the median public pension fund. If you compound $193 million over the course of a decade at 7.5%, that's a little over $2.5 billion over the course of a decade, simply in fee savings. We want every dollar available to compound investment returns for the benefit of our members and beneficiaries rather than paying out those assets in fees. The next page depicts three other funds which we were also responsible for. In addition to the large PERS portfolio, we also manage three additional portfolios, namely the Legislators Investment Fund, which as of June 30, 2020 was a little over $4.5 million in assets. The Judicial Retirement System for the judges in the state of Nevada at $140.9 million in assets. And then we also manage the Retirement Benefits Investment Fund, which is technically an entirely separate structure from Nevada PERS and has its own board. Those assets are invested to fund other post-employment benefits, health benefits, post-retirement for participating entities. And that fund has grown to $603.8 million as of June 30, 2020. Now, while the PERS fund is, we employ the simple approach of the larger PERS portfolio, these are really the most distilled down version of the simple approach, in that they utilize 100% public market assets. They don't employ private market assets like we do in the Nevada PERS portfolio, simply because their size doesn't facilitate the ability to invest in private real estate and private equity in the manner that we do within the PERS portfolio. And what we found with these smaller portfolios is that we were able to put together ultimately an asset mix which is designed to mimic the risk and return profile of the larger PERS fund. And these smaller portfolios over time have performed roughly in line with Nevada PERS. Over extended time periods, the return of these smaller portfolios are within 10 basis points of the larger PERS portfolio. They exhibit a little bit higher volatility, a little bit higher realized standard deviation, because they don't have the benefit of those private market assets. However, over extended time periods, returns have been roughly in line. So it's sort of a proof statement to some extent that with a relatively simple mix of assets, we can put together an investment portfolio that will deliver returns in line with a much larger program. The next page, titled PERS Investment Returns, depict Nevada PERS investment results for various time periods ended June 30, 2020. The furthest left column represents Nevada PERS return through the most recent fiscal year ended June 30, 2020. Nevada PERS had a return of 7.2%, which we were very pleased with. It was an extraordinarily volatile year in financial markets for obvious reasons. And so it ended up being actually a relatively strong year due to the sharp recovery in stocks from March through June. And then over extended time periods, you'll see Nevada PERS return 8.1% annualized for 3 years, 7.6% annualized over the last 5 years, 9.5% over the last decade. It's been a really terrific decade to be an investor. And over the last 36 years, 9.2% annualized return net of fees. And so that's since Nevada PERS inception. An additional kind of touchstone that you'll see on the next page as to, I think, the effectiveness of our simple approach, our Nevada PERS returns relative to the universe of other large public pension funds. And what you'll see on this page is sort of a proof statement that Nevada PERS simple approach is not only cost effective, but it can also be, and has proven to be effective from a return standpoint as well. Over the most recent fiscal year, Nevada PERS portfolio was in the second percentile, so the top 1 or 2 funds in the country last year with a return of 7.2%. The median public pension fund last year had a return of 2.4%. There was a fairly wide dispersion in returns last year. I think that was primarily due to the extraordinary volatility experienced over that 12-month period. Over longer time periods, which are really more important than the single time period, Nevada PERS returns have proven to be highly competitive with the simple approach relative to the median fund. Nevada PERS return over the last 3 years is the best return in the industry, second percentile over the last 5 years, 7th percentile over the last 7th, 8th percentile over the last decade, 12th percentile over the last 15 years, 6th percentile over the last 20, and in the top quartile of large public funds since inception. So over those longer time periods, Nevada PERS returns have proven to be highly competitive. Now, I'll mention one caveat when I'm talking about relative returns compared to the universe of public funds. While Nevada PERS returns have proven to be resilient over longer time horizons, in any given year, we expect to see our returns kind of bump around in that database. For instance, over the last decade or the last 20 years, Nevada PERS is in the top 6th percentile of large public pension fund investment programs. However, within that same 20-year time period, Nevada PERS return was in the bottom quartile or worse 5 different times. So roughly a quarter of the time in individual years, we can expect to see Nevada PERS towards the bottom of the database. And that is to be expected. If we're going to design an investment program that's different than everybody else, we know that there's going to be time periods when Nevada PERS returns look different. And sometimes we'll be in single years and over short and medium time periods, we'll be towards the bottom of that database. So if I'm presenting before you in a couple of years and we're closer to the bottom over a 1 or 2 year period, which I don't know we will be, but if that does happen, that's one of those things that we expect to happen roughly a quarter of the time. However, we do continue to believe that Nevada PERS simple, low-cost approach will continue to be effective and competitive relative to the more complicated portfolios in the universe over extended time periods. We just expect to see a little bit of volatility within that universe over shorter time periods. That same volatility in returns relative to the public fund universe, we also expect to see on an absolute basis as well. And what the chart that you see on this page depicts Nevada PERS fiscal year returns for each of the last since 1985 on an annual basis. And the red line across the middle of the page depicts Nevada PERS 7.5% long-term investment return assumption. And it's absolutely critical to always remember that that 7.5% return assumption is a long-term assumption. It is not an assumption that we expect to hit each and every single year. It is not an assumption that we expect to hit even over medium time periods as well. It's a long-term assumption, a multi-decade assumption. Over shorter time periods, we expect to see a pretty wide dispersion around that red line, and that's exactly what we've seen happen. There's been years where we've been well below it. Obviously, during the financial crisis, you can see 2008 and 2009 were very difficult years. A couple other years of negative returns in the early 2000s associated with the tech bubble collapse. And we expect to see this pattern of returns continue into the future. There'll be years where we're both well above and below that red line, and we expect to see that continue out into the future as well. We know for a fact, and every long-term investor, whether you're a retail investor, an individual investor, or a big institutional investor like Nevada PERS, we all need to expect that we're going to encounter all sorts of periods in financial markets, both good and bad. And the important thing to remember is, and what I think we've been particularly good at here at the retirement system, is when we run into those tough spots like we did in 08 and 09 and 2001 and 2002, that we don't alter course and we continue to implement what has been an effective program. We continue to implement it with absolute discipline through all market cycles. And I think above and anything else, that's ultimately been probably the key to our success. With that, that concludes my prepared remarks.
And thank you both for your presentation. I know there was a lot of material there, but it was very informative, and it gives an opportunity for all our members to understand exactly the history and how we got to where we are and how important our public employees are, and how much they've stepped up to the plate over the years for the benefit of the state. So thank you again both for the presentation. With that, I'm going to open up for questions, and if we could please start with Assemblywoman Thomas, please.
Hey, thank you so much, Mr. Chair. And I want to just thank Ms. Liss, and I believe it was Mr. Goodman. Am I correct? I hope so. Anyway, for your presentation, it was very informative. I just have a question about slides 7 and 8, about the police and fire fund. I'm not understanding why your assessment of that fund is combined. Would a truer assessment be separate? Because I'm wondering if the same police and firemen, if they retire at the same rate, at the same age, if they have injuries that are the same, it just seems like it's kind of like I'm not getting the full picture. And I was wondering why that is. Thank you.
Yeah, so we have the police fire fund so that the police and fire, because of the physical demands of their job, can retire at a younger age. So they do tend to retire at a younger age. They are combined with the entire fund. So for instance, we have one full trust fund, and assets, we do account for the assets separately, so we can account for the cost separately, but it is one trust fund that is available to pay for both the benefits on the police fire side and the regular side. So what we see is the police fire fund they do retire younger. They also tend to start younger. Their average entry age into the system tends to be quite a bit younger than the regular fund. So they start younger on average, retire younger on average, but they tend to retire with more service credit because of starting at a younger age. And right now is another interesting fact with the police fire versus the regular. At the moment, we are on the same mortality table for regular and police fire, which is telling us at the moment, on average, our regular and police fire have about the same longevity. So the police fire, they tend to start younger, they tend to retire younger, but they tend to live to about the same age. I'm not sure if that really gets to your question or not, but I'd be happy to follow up.
Please, Mr. Chair, may I follow up?
Please follow up.
Thank you. Well, part of the question is you say the age of police and fire starting at a younger age, and I'm assuming retiring at a younger age, and injuries that would be assessed to them. Again, just because, the police, when you say an early age, what is that age? Fire, what is that age? Retirement, what is the retirement age? Is the longevity for fire longer than police? Is there a tendency, is there a trend of retiring earlier in the police department relative to the fire department? So, just so that I would be able to get a clearer understanding of how much money that each, the fire and or police attributes to PERS, that would give me a clearer understanding of I believe, a true assessment of the, on average, the annual, how they actually are assessed in PERS, because, to average out an annual salary for police and fire when, one makes more money than the other, to average out 79, almost 80,000, I don't think that that's a true assessment. Thank you.
So Tina List, for the record, Assemblywoman, to get hopefully a little closer to your question, of the 13,000, about 13,587 members as of June 30, approximately, I would say about 2,500 of those are firefighters. The remaining is police officers. So the lion's share in that fund is going to be police, about 2,500 are going to be about firefighters. They have the same benefit provisions. They typically their eligibility for retirement is going to be age 50 with at least 20 years of service. That's, I think, your most common eligibility. So you're looking at retirement at about age 50, possibly. Not everyone retires when they're eligible to. Some people will retire a little bit farther. Because we pay them combined rate, we do not tend to break out the police fire. I believe I could break those out for you as far as ages and salaries, but that is not something I have on hand with me this morning.
All right, thank you so much. I really do appreciate your time, both of your times. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Next, we have Assemblyman Matthews, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to also thank both of our presenters for being with us here this morning. Question for, I guess, either one of our presenters. I wanted to ask about something that you touched on, which is the PERS unfunded liability, something that, of course, comes up quite a bit when one discusses the public employees retirement system. The Federal Reserve recently did a review of the PERS system, and the year I wanted to ask about was actually 2016. For that year, the estimates from officials with PERS were that the unfunded liability for the system was about $12.56 billion. That same year, the Federal Reserve estimated the unfunded liability to be about $43.3 billion. Now, obviously, that is a very, very significant gap. So I'm wondering if you might be able to speak to what you feel may account for that significant difference. I'm not sure how familiar you may be with that Federal Reserve review, whether you believe there may have been a flaw in their analysis, what that flaw may be. I'm just wondering if you might be able to offer something to account for that very, very significant difference. Thank you.
Yes, Assemblyman Matthews, this is Steve Edmondson, Investment Officer, Nevada PERS. I am somewhat familiar with that study, and I believe the primary difference, and I think that what you would see if you looked at that study was that the fairly wide discrepancy between the unfunded liability reported by public pension funds across the board, including Nevada PERS and the Federal Reserve study, was that they used different underlying assumptions. And I don't know what the underlying investment return assumption was used in that particular study, but I think it was significantly lower than what the median public pension fund assumes for their investment returns. I think is the primary difference between those two numbers.
Thank you. Follow-up question, Mr. Chairman?
Please follow up.
Thank you for that. So the number from 2016, according to, again, PERS officials, $12.56 billion. Are you able to tell us what that number, what that unfunded liability, according to PERS estimates, would be currently?
Tina List, for the record, the executive officer. As of June 30, 2020, the unfunded liability is about $14.5 billion from the last actuarial evaluation.
Assemblyman Matthews, I don't know if you had a follow-up.
Just as a point of clarification, Mr. Chairman, so you said 14.5 billion increased over about 12.56 billion from about 4 years prior. Is that correct?
That's correct. The actual number, Tina List, for the record, I'm sorry. The actual number, yes, but the funded ratio increased because of the increase of the assets as well.
Thank you. No more questions from me, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblyman. Next, we have Assemblywoman Considine, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you both for a very understandable presentation. My question is that I understand the benefits to the employees for this program. Can you tell me what the benefits are to the state for having this type of program?
Tina List, for the record. So in essence, the benefits to the state are to help attract and retain employees to the system. So for instance, I think employers might find it harder to recruit if there were no retirement benefit provided to them through their employment. And also the retention piece of it, because it is something that I do believe a lot of public employees value very highly, having that defined benefit pension plan that they are earning through their career. So for the employer, it is to attract and retain those employees that they have invested in to train.
Great, thank you. If next we can have Assemblywoman Anderson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Director List, as well as Mr. Edmondson. Incredible information. Really appreciate all the how relatable it was. My question has to do with slide number 3. When it comes to the independent actuary, is that their recommendation has to be adopted or may be adopted? That's my first question. And then I've got a second one that's kind of from the same time frame, but I didn't know if you wanted them separate or not.
This is Tina List for the record. So under the Constitution, the word is shall. The board shall adopt actuarial assumptions based upon the recommendations made by the independent actuary. So we do believe that the board is somewhat limited. It shall adopt the assumptions based on what the actuary recommends, and the actuary is fully independent of state government for the reasons to make sure that there really are no political influences on those assumptions. So it is a shall.
Thank you, and I appreciate that clarification. And then the second portion, oh, I'm so sorry, Mr. Chair, may I ask a second question?
Yes, please do.
Thank you. Again, from slide 3 or right around that time frame, you had mentioned that the members of the PERS board are appointed. How long are their appointments, and are these staggered? So that way, again, there is a mix of individuals that are, or are they all starting brand new every single time that we have a new governor? Thank you.
Tina List for the record. So they are 4-year terms, which are set by the legislature, and they are somewhat staggered. We have certain years where we have 3 new members or potentially 3 new members. They are always eligible for reappointment. And we have 1 year, I think, where we do not have any terms ending. So they are somewhat staggered, essentially 3, 2, or 1, or 0. And those are, like I said, 4-year terms. They are governor appointed, but they don't start with a new governor. So for instance, the members will stay on even through a new governor until their term ends. Then the governor will appoint when those terms become vacant.
Thank you so much. And again, I really appreciated your guys' presentation.
And thank you, members, for your questions. I want to make sure that I did not accidentally skip over anybody. Is there anybody else wishing to ask a question? I don't believe we have anybody else wishing to ask a question. I wanted to thank you both again for your presentation. And members, as we move forward, I encourage you to reach out to them, and they have a wealth of information, and I'm sure that they're very accessible. So thank you again. And at this time, I'm going to go ahead and close out the presentation from the Public Employees Retirement System. And next, we're going to open up the presentation from the Public Employees Benefit Program.
Good morning,
Good morning and welcome.
members of the committee. I am Laura Rich, Executive Officer of the Public Employees Benefits Program. If you will bear with me for 1 second, I'm going to try to share my screen. And hopefully it's the right one. All right. All right, are you able to see that?
We can, thank you.
Okay. So a little bit about our agency. The Public Employees Benefits Program is a group health program. We have about 45,000 primary participants, and those primary participants cover 27,000 dependents. So overall, we cover 72,000 lives. We offer comprehensive medical, prescription, and dental, vision, and life insurance to all of our members. Similar to PERS, PEB is also governed by a board, a 10-member board, under NRS 287. And we have 34 staff. So we are a fairly small agency with a lot of responsibility. PEB is funded not by the state's general fund, but by employer contributions. So those are agencies that are contributing the employer portion, which is a legislatively set amount. And then the other part of it is the employee and retiree premiums. So the way that PEB receives all of its funding is through employers and employees. We have one of the largest budgets in the state. We have a $1 billion biannual budget. Our mission is to provide employees, retirees, and their families with access to high quality benefits at affordable prices. We do this through the different values that you see here. So service, innovation, accountability, transparency is big. We try to be as transparent as we possibly can. Fairness, integrity, compassion, sustainability, and collaboration. We have a lot of different public employers that we cover, and so collaboration is very important. So who can participate in PEB? We typically refer to the two different categories as either state or non-state. So state is considered state agencies, the boards and commissions as well. So for example, the Board of Nursing, and then also the legislature and the system of higher education. They are for the active employees. These are full-time employees. Full-time is considered anything over 80 hours in a month. And also retirees. So retirees are eligible at the time of retirement, or they do have one opportunity to re-enroll during an annual open enrollment phase. What I do want to point out here is that those employees who were hired after January 1st, 2012 are not eligible for subsidized health insurance when they retire. So moving forward, anybody hired after 2012 will not receive those subsidies that we offer retirees today. The other category is non-states. Those are local governments and municipalities out there. Exactly, it's the full-time employees also over 80 hours in a month, but the employer has to participate in the program. And currently, right now, for the actives, I believe we only have a handful of active employees under that non-state category. And when I say it's a handful, it's about 10. Also retirees as well. We offer the retirees eligibility through our program as well, but it is an all-in or all-out policy after 2007. So that means if a non-state entity would like to participate in PEB, they have to bring not just their retirees, but their active population too. So they have to come with their entire population, not just one or the other. So PEB coverage highlights. We have 3 plans today. We will be offering 3 different plans coming July of 2021. So we have a statewide consumer-driven health plan. That is what we call a CDHP. It's a high deductible PPO plan. We will be offering coming July of 21 a new statewide low deductible plan as well. And then we have 2 regional plans, one in the north and one in the south. And essentially they mirror each other. They're almost the same plan, but they're just covered under different entities. One is the EPO in the north and the other is an HMO in the south. For our Medicare retirees, we offer an individual Medicare marketplace exchange. And so this is where our Medicare eligible retirees can purchase those Medicare plans. And we provide to them an HRA, a health reimbursement arrangement contribution to help offset some of those costs as well. On top of the just basic medical coverage that we offer. We also offer supplementary benefits through a voluntary platform. These are things such as short-term disability, voluntary life insurance, long-term care, flexible spending. We also have car insurance, home insurance, things like that that we offer through group plans as well, through a voluntary platform. So this gives our employees and our members access to additional benefits that are not necessarily subsidized by the state, but are offered by the state. So you're going to hear a lot about upcoming plan design changes in this session. Actually throughout the entire year of 2020, the PEB board made a lot of changes to the program as a result of all of the budget challenges that we've had to face. And so as I just mentioned, we are offering a new low deductible plan. We have modifications to the existing plans as well. We made some out-of-network billing changes where instead of using fair health standards to negotiate out-of-network billed charges, we're actually moving to 140% of Medicare model, and that actually saves the plan a lot of money. We have implemented a few different RX, so pharmacy prescription programs that essentially narrow the network, but provide not just the plan, but the member some savings as well. There were some basic life insurance reductions as part of the basic benefit package. PEB offers its members a basic life insurance policy. So today, that life insurance policy is $25,000 for an active and $12,500 for a retiree. That was reduced to $15,000 and $7,500 respectively. And the elimination of the long-term disability insurance. Long-term disability insurance, I'll go into that in a moment. That is also part of the basic package that PEB members receive as part of their enrollment into PEB. And then the Medicare Exchange HRA funding, that was reduced from $13 a month per year of service to $11 a month per year of service. This grid here just demonstrates where we are at today and what the board chose and approved back in November as a result of the 12% reductions that we were asked to make from the Governor's Finance Office, or by the Governor's Finance Office in November. And then what actually came out of the Governor's recommended budget. So you'll see here that last column under GovRec, that is what the proposed changes are to the July 1st, 2021 plan year. You'll see that some of those deductibles changed on the CDHP, and the new low deductible plan actually is, it's actually a very, very low deductible, $500 and $1,000 for the family. And then we have the EPO HMO, which is your typical copay-based HMO type plan that we did introduce a very, very small new low deductible to that one as well. But overall, we were able to maintain, the governor in his budget, in his recommended budget, was able to maintain a lot of those benefit levels because a lot of the extra funding was directed towards the medical side of our benefits versus some of the ancillary products that we have. So as you can see, the rates are likely to maintain, be very stable moving forward. Those rates will not be set until the March board meeting. So these are just example rates that are being shown today. Our actuaries actually need much more experience and trend and utilization in order to model to be able to model those rates. So this is where we were at as of December, but those rates are expected to be pretty stable for those employees and retirees on our plan. As you can see, the basic life insurance, long-term disability, and Medicare HRA contributions down on the lower left-hand side, those were changed from what the board recommendations were back in November. So why did we introduce a new plan? First of all, back when we were asked, all agencies were asked to submit agency request budgets, we were asked to submit flat budgets. So for PEB, a flat budget, because essentially your dollar doesn't go as far with healthcare, right? So the cost increase, utilization increases, and so your 5% or your flat budget is approximately a 5% cut. So we knew right away that this was going to impact current plan design if we did not change things. And with a high deductible plan, we were going to, the only levers we really had at the time were to either reduce the HSA funding that we provide on that high deductible plan, or to increase deductibles and out-of-pocket maxes and things like that. And so we thought, okay, what else can we do to mitigate the pain of flat budgets? And this is before we even knew that there were going to be additional budget cuts moving forward. There was also a desire for a low deductible option. Back in the day, prior to the last Great Recession, PEB did offer a low deductible plan to employees. And as a result of that recession, we moved to a high deductible plan. And so we've heard through public comment and through advocacy groups that there was a strong desire for that low deductible option to come back. So we worked really hard to make sure that that was introduced, even despite the challenges that we face today, our budget challenges that we're facing today. The basics of the new deductible, low deductible plan. It's very similar to our high deductible plan. Members have access to a robust nationwide provider network. They also do not require referrals from a primary care physician. So this is different, and usually in an HMO model, they do. Many services also, it's very important to note that they are copay based and do not require the member to meet the deductible. So for example, going to see your primary care doctor or your specialist, there's a copay associated with that. You're not required to meet that deductible for those types of benefit levels. Also, copays do apply to the out-of-pocket max, but they do not apply to the deductible. So I wanted to touch a little bit on the elimination of long-term disability, because this is something that you're going to hear about during this session. Long-term disability is a benefit that pays a percentage of your salary when you've become disabled and are unable to work for an extended period of time due to a chronic illness or a debilitating injury. And as I mentioned earlier, this long-term disability is something that PEB offers members who are enrolled in our program at no cost. This is just part of the basic package. And the reason that this is included as part of the basic package is, if you heard from Ms. Lease when she spoke about the public employees retirement system, is that we do not pay into Social Security. And so Social Security disability is not an option for those folks who have not paid into Social Security before they started with their state employment. So this benefit does come at a pretty significant cost to the program. The benefit is at the 60% level, so that's 60% of of your salary being covered under this disability benefit. It comes at a $9.2 million a year cost. And then at the 50% level, it's $6.3 million. And so it is quite a hefty cost to the program, and which is why it was eliminated. I think in the governor's recommended budget, there was a desire to maintain and preserve any of those health insurance benefits and ensure that those stayed intact, to ensure that, especially during a global pandemic, that our employees have access to medical benefits. So what I wanted to point out here is that there are some states that do pay for it. So just a quick glance on the western in the western states, Utah and Washington do pay for it, do pay for this benefit for their members. Colorado, New Mexico, and Oregon, though, do offer it as an opt-in, and they have employees pay for this benefit if those employees want it. There is, as Ms. Leese, again, she covered during her presentation, PERS disability retirement. So while it's not the same benefit, it is a similar benefit where if you do become disabled, those that pay into PERS do have that disability retirement benefit. Also, if you do have Social Security, so for example, perhaps a new employee who's only been at the state for several years, came from the private sector, they would likely have Social Security and may have access to SSDI. We are also offering, we're looking at it through PEB to offer this type of benefit through the voluntary platform moving forward. So those employees who wish to purchase this benefit are going to have access through our voluntary benefit platform as of, we're hoping, January 1st of 22. Other plan changes that were made throughout the year, essentially, these plan changes all have one goal in mind, or policy changes, I'm sorry. These policy changes are really to make the program more actuarially sound. So you've heard me say that PEB does use independent actuaries that we contract with and that assist us throughout all of our processes and administration of the program. So there were a few gaps where the actuaries were historically had done their job, and then PEB would come in and do something else to it, making it less actuarially sound. And so what we did and what the board did is make some policy decisions to ensure that this did not happen and ensure that that actuarial process was maintained throughout, from beginning to end. And so some of the things that were done is the board decided to or approved the underwriting of all self-funded plans. So basically, we have two risk pools that are statutorily required. We have the state and the non-state risk pool. While we maintain those risk pools separately, we have underwritten all of the self-funded plans into one single risk pool. So all of those plans, for example, the CDHP, the EPO, and the new low deductible plan they're all PEB responsibility, and so they're all considered as one group, and they're all underwritten that way. This creates stability among all the different plans. And so if you have, for example, one or a group of highly sick individuals who are on one plan, and then during open enrollment, they move to another plan, it affects the risk of that plan. And so there's a lot of instability in premiums and in just experience in general. And so what it does is if you see people migrating to one plan over another, there's what we call a death spiral of that plan. And so this eliminates the impact of that plan migration. We also, in the past, have favored one plan over another. And that really doesn't make sense because a PEB plan is a PEB plan. We shouldn't care what plan our members are in, and we should contribute to those plans equally. And so the policy was changed where all plans will receive an equal flat dollar subsidy amount. So that's that subsidy amount that I mentioned earlier that that the legislature approves. This produces more accurate budget projections, and that variable of plan selection is removed as well. We have simplified the HSA and HRA funding, the way that we do that. In the past, and this has changed a little bit with the budget situation that we have, but in the past we have funded our high deductible plan with employer contribution. So the state has funded, or our program has funded, that HSA account for those people on the high deductible plan. And we funded it by giving the employees a basic amount. And then if they had any dependents, depending on the amount of dependents, we would give them additional amounts. The board chose to eliminate this strategy and instead fund it basically on an employee-only level. And what this does is it eliminates the dependent variable. So there's a lot of guessing and projections that happen in our program and that have a very significant impact on our budget. And so the more variables we have, the more guessing, we have, the more times we have to guess right, essentially. So this eliminates that dependent variable and just simplifies the funding strategies so that we can, again, have improved budget projections. We also did a streamlining of tier factors. So to ensure that the rates were actuarially sound, historically, what we've done is we've had our actuaries come up with, propose the overall rates for the program. And they use actuarial methodology for this. And so then they give it to PEB, and PEB has come along and said, okay, now we're going to add all of our administrative fees to this. And so that has taken away from the soundness of what those actuaries have done. And so we changed this strategy recently so that the actuaries are now very heavily involved from the beginning to the end. And this strategy now includes more traditional actuarial underwriting and includes all of the actuaries are very, very involved in the inclusion of the plan administrative costs that are worked into the overall rates. So what is self-funded? PEB is we are a self-funded plan. So this means that PEB is responsible for member claims. We are the insurance company. We pay those claims that come in. And how do we pay those claims? Those, again, are through the employer and employee contributions. And they have to be sufficient to cover the cost of claims in that plan year. So this is why we use actuaries. Actuaries, again, they do the projections and they essentially report to PEB. This is what we project that your plan, based on cost, based on trend and utilization, this is what it's going to cost the program to run. And this is what you need to charge in premiums, in plan premiums. And again, this is a statutorily required, or it's a requirement to include those actuarial consultants to determine those overall rates. So how does it work? Members, so PEB leases networks. Members access providers under those networks. Then when a member goes and uses a provider, let's say they go to a primary care physician, that provider then bills PEB. That claim is then repriced. There's a billed cost, and then there's a billed claim, and then there's a paid claim. Usually they're very different in pricing. The billed is what the provider bills, and then the actual paid claim is the repriced claim at the network contracted rates, which are usually quite a bit lower. Our third-party administrator pays the claim, and then they also apply the member accumulator. So when I talk about an accumulator, an accumulator references those deductibles and out-of-pocket maxes. So that's the tracking that goes along with it. And this is also a very, very simplified version. Obviously, this is a lot more complicated, but I didn't want to get into the weeds on this. So if there are more questions, I'm happy to answer them. We also have reserves. So we have some required reserves. Those are incurred but not reported, or also referred to as IBNR. Those reserves are for claims that have transpired but have not been reported yet. So these are people that have gone to the doctor, but we don't know about it yet. We have not been billed for it. We are required to fully fund this at a 95% probability to cover all the claims that are submitted for that plan year as determined by our actuaries. So one of the questions I received at a different presentation was, why do your IBNR every year increase? And it's because it's tied to claims. The higher the claims, the more we have in liability, the more IBNR we have to have in reserves as well. This is the same for catastrophic reserves too. So we are a self-funded plan. We cannot get ourselves into a situation where we cannot pay our claims. And so these reserves are intended to cover those unprojected claims and losses that we may not have accounted for. So, for example, the actuaries they make those projections and they say every year, this is what we think that your program will cost to run. But we don't know if we have, for example, just recently we had an individual who had $7 million in claims. That was not a projected cost, and that is a very, very significant impact to the program. And so this is something that would be outside of the norm. And if you have enough of those, you have to dip into catastrophic reserves. So those reserves are funded at a level equal to 50 days of claims payments. Again, these are also actuarially determined as well. This is a required reserve as well. So then there's also the HRA, health reimbursement arrangement. And these are reserves intended to cover the unused HRA balances. You heard me say that the Medicare exchange folks, so those are our retirees who are on the Medicare exchange, they get contributions from the program on a years of service basis. So currently, there are members with 20 years of that's the maximum 20 years who receive $260 a month to offset some of their Medicare premiums. Those accumulate, they accrue. And so we have our HRA reserve to cover those because we don't pay those. The HRA is not a payment to the members, it's a reimbursement. And so we have to have a sufficient balance to reimburse those claims. Those are funded at an 80% level, and it is also a required reserve. Then the last category is excess reserves. In the past, the legislature has heard a lot about excess reserves because the plan and the program had accrued quite a significant level of excess reserves. And so there was a a push to get the program to spend down those excess reserves and put them back into the plan to offset some of the cost coming into the plan. That has now been, it's now reduced to acceptable levels, I think. But basically what that is, it's the difference between the cash received and the cash spent at the end of each fiscal year. So it's what we're left over with. And with a budget as large as ours and based on so many projections, especially in a year with, you know, a lot of healthcare challenges, excess reserves are definitely, we want to see them. We just don't want to see very, very high balances of excess reserves. Plan year 22-23 member impact. So plan year 22 changes, this is this upcoming plan year, which starts in July. We have a new eligibility and enrollment system, which goes live in January. We don't want to do this over open enrollment. We don't want to roll something out during the time when everyone is selecting their plans, and you know there's a lot of activity through in our program. So we're waiting until January to roll this out. But essentially, this is going to be a front-facing system that any PEB members will be using, as well as the administrative side. So all of our staff internally here will be using it as well to manage and administer the program. We also have new voluntary benefit options starting in January of 22 as well, when that new system rolls out. We also have a new statewide provider network that is going to be implemented in July upon the approval of BOE next week. This provider network will obviously change the providers that are available compared to what they are today. And so there will be a disruption. In some ways, there will be additions to the provider network. For example, for those of us in the north, we will have access now to St. Mary's, which is not something that PEB members have had access to, at least in the last decade. So this is a big, big win for us in the north, but there will be some provider disruption, and PEB will be reaching out to anybody who has a provider today, who is using a provider today, who is projected to not be in network moving forward in July. So this is going to be a big communications reach out to those members. Then we have potential plan year 23 changes. We have a lot of contracts that go out to bid, and not only are they a lot of contracts, but they are the very, very significant contracts that may potentially change. So we could potentially see ourselves with a new pharmacy benefit manager. So this is anyone who has a pharmacy claim goes through the PBM, the pharmacy benefit manager. They are the vendor who processes those pharmacy claims. Then we have a potentially new third-party administrator. This is all of the medical claims go through the third-party administrator. So you can already see that there's going to be a significant member impact, whether you use PEB for your medical or for your RX. You are going to see a change if these providers change or if these vendors change hands. We will likely have a new HSA and HRA administrator, telemedicine provider, shopping tool comparison provider, and then also potentially more national and statewide network changes as well. So we are gearing up for plan year 23 to really have everyone prepared, members prepared, staff prepared for these potential changes moving forward. It will be a challenging year, to say the least. Variables that are likely to impact the PEB budget. You've heard me say over and over that our budget is very dependent on a lot of different projections, and should any of those projections be off, it changes things considerably. So like you heard me just discuss, we have gone through a lot of different contract changes in this FY22. Luckily, there's been some of the dental network and some of these that we've already gone out to bid for, we've maintained the same vendors, and so there's not going to be a lot of changes there. However, you did just hear me talk about the in-state medical network that will be changing. Not only is there an impact to the members, but this is a very, very significant impact to PEB as well into our budget, because those contracted rates through that network will have a significant impact on the budget, because that is the majority of our budget is claims. And so any changes in claims will definitely have, you'll see those changes in our budget as well, or in our spending, in our expenditures. Luckily, we are projected to save several $1 million out of this network change, so I'm happy about that. But we also have, different changes. We maintained our HMO down in the south, so it's the same vendor there. We're changing our financial auditor, our health plan auditor, and our benefits management system. So those are all contracts that affect our budget. And then, as you just heard me say, we have a lot of contracts that are renewing in FY23 as well. So those are going to have major cost implications. And then claims. COVID has affected everybody, but it's definitely affected our program. The COVID-19 claims costs, we have been receiving reimbursements through the CARES Act, but that is, again, it's an unknown as to whether that's going to be available moving forward. And then also, while vaccine costs, our vaccines are free, there is still a cost to the program. And so similar to, for example, a flu vaccine, the program is administered an administrative fee is really what it is. It's a cost that the provider charges the program. And it's a low fee. It's about $25. But if you're talking $25 and everybody receives a vaccine, right, that's an unprojected cost to the program that we had not budgeted for. Plan design changes as well. So we introduced a new plan, or we're going to introduce a new plan. We don't know, usually it takes a couple of years before we actually see a stabilization in utilization. So for the first couple of years, there's kind of an up and down in utilization, and it's hard to project trend. We also have medical and pharmacy trend. So typically on any normal year, we would have fairly solid projections as to what we think trend is going to be. Unfortunately, with COVID, that's really impacted trend. And so while we have we've made aggressive projections on trend based on COVID having an effect. Again, it just introduces that level of unknown. And so should that trend be different than what was projected, it could definitely affect our program as well. So PEB has some proposed legislation out there. AB 48 authorizes certain retired public officers and employees to reinstate insurance under the Public Employees Benefits Program. You'll see this legislation out there. Basically, this is to fix a problem that we were having where we have a disparity between the state and the non-state state employees who or state retirees, I'm sorry, who are on the exchange they do have one opportunity to leave and come back. Non-state employees by statute do not. What was happening was they were mistakenly disenrolling from our program, because what would happen is they would enroll through our vendor, and then they'd go to, let's say, a health fair or something, and you'd have a retiree that would be approached by a health plan, let's say AARP, and they would say, hey, look, we've got this great health plan, and you should enroll through us. And so that retiree would enroll, and that would subsequently disenroll them from the PEB program because they were enrolled in a different Medicare plan, and they would lose all of their benefits. So that $260 a month that I referred to earlier, if they were getting that, they would lose it. And statutorily, it could not be reinstated because those non-state retirees would not have that ability to come back to the program. And so they do lose that. So this really just gives those the non-state retirees the same ability to reinstate that one-shot opportunity to come back to the program and reinstate their benefits should they make a mistake like this. And that concludes my presentation. So I will open it up for questions if there are any questions.
And thank you for your presentation. Members, I know that there was a lot of material that was thrown at you, but I don't know that there's any way to have this conversation without doing it this way. So thank you again for that presentation. And we'll go ahead and open it up and start off with Assemblyman Ellison, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I enjoyed both the programs that was presented. From what I gather, that somebody can retire at the 10 years, is that correct? At the 10-year, they could take an early retirement, but say they try to come back in or they want to buy back into the system. Is that possible?
No, so if a member retires, I
apologize to cut you off. If I could still have you state your name for the record.
Oh, I'm sorry. For the record,
Laura
Rich. No, so if a member retires.
And that we're talking early retirement.
Right. So it does not matter to the program when a member retires. If they have drawn retirement, they then are eligible to come back, but they are not eligible to come back once as a retiree. But that is it. If they come back as it gets a little muddy because we do have some of these legislative employees who come back temporarily, and I'm happy to provide you some of the exceptions to all of these. I don't know if it would be wise of me to go into all of the details right now. I'm happy to provide them to you in writing. But there are some exceptions to a lot of these rules. However, generally, no, if someone retires, then you start drawing retirement, and that is your opportunity to come on to the program. And you have one additional opportunity to come on to the program if you were to disenroll for any reason.
Okay. Yeah, somebody asked me that question. I couldn't answer it. So I'm glad you did. And that gives me an idea which way to go. And if I can get some information from you, I'll get it to them. But I really appreciate that. And thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Assemblyman. Next, we'll go to Assemblywoman Anderson, please.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And very informative information, Ms. Rich. My question has to do with the board itself. I understand that it was interesting to hear about all the money situations and the money decisions, but I think we're more about the policy on this committee. So my question has to do with the board members that are appointed. They make the decisions. Can the governor's finance office make a decision and then not give it back to that board? I guess I'm really asking this more about the eliminating of the long-term insurance and disability. Was that a decision of the board of PEB, or was that a decision made out of the governor's office?
For the record, Laura Rich, so the board has the ability to make policy decisions. The board is ultimately appointed by the governor. All 10 members are appointed by the governor. Unlike PERS, PEB is subject to the Budget Act. And so we do go through the governor's finance office. And so when that happens, and I'll go through kind of the steps so that you understand, there's agencies typically submit an agency request budget. And so the way PEB goes about it is we present options to the board, and the board makes those decisions and approves ultimately what the agency will submit to the governor's finance office. At that point, the governor's finance office typically has the ability to make different budget decisions. And unfortunately, with our program, every budget decision is a plan design decision as well. And so when you take or add from the program, there's levers. And so the governor's finance office definitely has to work with staff. And in this situation during the budget challenges that we're facing in November, December, there was obviously not a lot of time. We had a board meeting at the end of November. The agency submitted our 12% budget proposals to the governor's finance office. And then once the economic forum met, there was they discovered that there was, a little bit of wiggle room, and they were able to reinstate some of the funding to the program. At that point, it is in the governor's hands. It is ultimately the governor's recommended budget. And so it was a recommendation that was proposed by the governor and then was voted on by the board and ratified at our meeting in January as well. So while, yes, the governor's finance office does have only budgetary authority to make those changes, ultimately with our program, it affects the plan design, which is it's not outside of the norm. I believe that back during the last recession, something similar to this happened where the governor's finance office had to make decisions that were outside of the board based on the situation at hand at the time. So hopefully that answers your question.
Follow up, if I may, Mr. Chair.
Follow up, please.
It does to an extent, not as full as I would like. So I might be doing a conversation with you offline if you're okay with that. But I do have a quick follow up. With that decision, are the individuals in the governor's budget office aware or have the expertise that the PEB board has? I mean, that's one reason why they are appointed to it, is because of their knowledge of the different systems. And in the second question, so this was in fact approved by the PEB, the loss of the long-term disability was approved by the PEB board, if I'm understanding what you just stated, from the January board meeting, or did I misunderstand that last little bit?
For the record, Laura Rich, yes, it was approved by the board in January. It was the governor's recommended budget was presented to the board in January and was approved as presented. So yes, and then to your other question, the governor's finance office, while they do not have the PEB specific expertise, they understand the PEB budget, and we have a budget analyst that is specifically assigned to the Public Employees Benefits Program. So there's a level of understanding as to how it impacts budgetarily. They also do follow all of our board meetings, but they are not tasked with the specific requirements that the board is tasked with.
And I'm assuming we don't have any follow-ups there, Assemblywoman. Okay, thank you. And next we'll go with our Madam Vice Chair, please.
Thank you, Chair. And I have a couple questions. So just given the nature of Zoom, do you mind if I just ask those questions back to back?
Please do.
Thank you. So my questions are going to be focused around the elimination of long-term disability, which was mostly covered on slide 10 of the presentation. And as I'm looking at it, you talked a little bit about like a possible, like the voluntary long-term disability, and I'm just wondering what cost to the employee for that?
The long-term, for the record, Laura Rich, for long-term disability is very dependent on the age of a person. It's also dependent on the salary of a person, because as you heard me say, the benefit levels are at a percentage of the salary. So obviously that's going to be very individualized. It will definitely be a significant cost to the employee. While I don't know for certain what it will be, and I hate to quote something, I'm not a long-term disability expert, nor am I an insurance agent of any type. It will definitely be a significant cost, something, along the lines of, I would say, upwards of $50.
And would that be 50 per paycheck? Just to ensure I'm understanding correctly.
For the record, Laura Rich, this would likely be per month. And again, this is just a guess based on what I've heard anecdotally. And, again, it would depend on what those salaries are. So someone making $35,000 obviously pay a lot less than someone making $135,000.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I understand that it might be hard to give an exact number when there's so many other factors that come to play. So I really do appreciate that. And I guess I just have some concerns about the long-term disability. If we've looked at or assessed whether or not getting rid of that could have a greater impact in other places for the state of Nevada. I just imagine if an individual is qualified for long-term disability, then they're probably not able to get back to work in another capacity. So is there any other economic impact that we as a state can expect from individuals that might not qualify for long-term disability and are otherwise incapable of working?
For the record, Laura Rich, as I mentioned earlier, there are options for those people that find themselves in that situation. It is not the same, and they're alternatives, but not the same, not exact alternatives. SSDI, for example, if someone has paid into Social Security disability, they would have access to that benefit. They would also have access to the PERS disability retirement benefit as well. So there are definitely alternatives to that. Now, whether there would be impacts down the road, there hasn't been an assessment done on that. That's certainly something that we can look into.
Thank you. Yes, I would definitely appreciate that, because I just imagine that would be draining on our other social services as well, and that the economic impact of that might not be worth the savings that we would otherwise see.
And members, do we have any other questions? I don't believe we do, but I want to make sure that I didn't actually go over somebody's question here. Seeing none, I want to thank you for your presentation. Thank you. And again, as always and previously stated, make sure that members, you reach out to her with questions as we move forward throughout session. Again, you have somebody in front of you who has a wealth of information and somebody who's always willing to work with us. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and close out the hearing, or better said, the presentation from Public Employees Benefit Program. And at this time, broadcasting, if we could go to public comment. Do we have anybody wishing to speak for public comment?
Sure, we do.
Thank you, Broadcasting. Whenever you're ready, we're ready to take public comment. And I would like to remind those wishing to speak in public comment that you please remain respectful and that because we are on time constraints, I ask that you limit your remarks to 2 minutes. Should your remarks be longer than that, there's always the option of you typing them up and sending them via email so that we can put those for the public to see.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 853. Please slowly state and spell your name. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good morning. Doug Unger, UNGER, member, UNLV Employee Benefits Advisory Committee, UNLV Chapter President, Nevada Faculty Alliance, and Southern Nevada Government Affairs, for the record. Good morning, Chair Flores and Vice Chair Torres, and distinguished members of the committee. Dr. Kent Irvin, in his written comment, has raised issues of process with the way the PEB plan designs presented to you today have come into being. Our Southern Nevada faculty share these concerns. But more than this, we sense in the plan designs presented to you that there may be entrenched, outdated convictions by the powers that be that premiums must be kept low or flat at the expense of other benefits. The impact of this approach is obvious. High out-of-pocket maximums in the CDHP and new PPO plans shift costs to the sickest state employees who can least afford that burden. Cutting $2 per month to retiree contributions is a regressive tax on members living on fixed incomes, and the proposed elimination of long-term disability insurance is dangerous and cruel for workers who by state and federal agreement are not covered by Social Security. Thousands of PEB members do not have enough accumulated in PERS to be able to survive being disabled for very long. And the 7,000 higher education faculty in our state would be left with nothing should they face an illness or accident that prevents them from working, or if they contract COVID-19 and be among the growing number of cases who suffer long-term disability. I am hearing daily from frontline professionals in our state's fight against the pandemic, doctors, nurses, and staff with the UNLV Medical School, nursing faculty from the College of Southern Nevada, and education professionals who must engage one-on-one with the public and our Nevada students. The elimination of LTD insurance is asking these most courageous of our state workers to do their jobs on a tightrope without a net. That's just not right. I was a bit distressed that Executive Officer Rich made the comparison to Oregon state employees and their voluntary LTD insurance. Oregon state employees have Social Security, so voluntary LTD insurance is an add-on for them. Furthermore, the costs are much more than $50 a month for most. Board member Michelle Kelly priced it out at the last PEB board meeting. You can see it on the record, and she couldn't find a policy for less than $200 a month. This just isn't right, and it's a most urgent issue for state employees. We hope we can all reach out to the governor's office, the PEB board, and the vigilant committees of the 81st session for acceptable solutions. Thank you all for your service this morning, and thank you again.
And thank you for your comments, sir. Broadcast, you could please go to the next member waiting to speak in public comment.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 686. Please slowly state and spell your name. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
For the record, Laura Nauman, N as in Nancy, A-U, M as in Mary, A-N-N. I'm an associate professor of psychology and the faculty senate chair at Nevada State College. I'm submitting public comment today to ask the legislature to consider restoring the long-term disability benefit that was eliminated in the governor's recommended budget. While those of us impacted by the changes to PEPB are grateful that the cuts were reduced from 12% to 6% and projected premiums were brought back down, many faculty and staff within the Nevada system of higher education are deeply concerned about the loss of benefits, particularly the long-term disability benefit. Given that we do not pay into Social Security and would not be eligible for Social Security disability benefits, it's unfortunate and often unforeseen circumstances of severe injury and disability. It was particularly difficult to watch the PEB board try to navigate the new recommendations from the governor's budget proposal. In the November board meeting, PEB voted to reduce the long-term disability benefit from 60% coverage to 50% coverage, recognizing that reducing the benefit in lieu of eliminating it outright was the preferred option. During last week's board meeting, it was clear that the appetite of the board was to keep the 50% long-term disability benefit, but were advised that they could not go against the governor's recommendations and that it would be up to the legislature to address this. I understand that few people are actually using the long-term disability benefit in any given year, but that's the point of insurance. You hope to never have to use it, but you have peace of mind knowing that it's there if you did. During the meeting, Laura Rich gave alternatives for those who may find themselves in this unfortunate situation. I'm an NG employee who is not in the PERS retirement system, so I'm not eligible to take that long-term disability benefit. I also do not pay into Social Security, so I'd be ineligible for Social Security disability benefits. To Assemblywoman Torres's question, I and other employees who share similar enrollment would be taking on Medicaid. So there would be kind of downstream consequences to the other elements of the state budget. I ask that you consider this as you develop responses to this. Thank you for your consideration.
And thank you for your public comment. Broadcast, if we could please go to the next member wishing to speak during public comment.
Caller with the last three digits of 237. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Thank you. Members of the Government Affairs Committee, my name is Marlene Lockard, Lockard, and I'm representing the retired public employees of Nevada. I think what has been lost in this discussion has been that PEB met the governor's budget requirements with the first budget that was presented. And so the budget office not only substituted their policy decision for the PEB board, but also the preference of the advocates who absolutely represent active state employees and retirees. Through the board meetings, we have made and testified during these tough budget times of what our preference would be in making these difficult cuts. So we're representing the very membership that the PEB board, the PEB was created to provide the employee benefits for. So I just want to make that point, and also to state that several sessions ago, we had a bill that strengthened the requirements and qualifications for PEB board members. And I, in my opinion, think we have one of the strongest, most qualified in this industry of PEB members than we've had in a very long time. And lastly, I cannot leave without reiterating my concern about Medicare retirees. As Laura mentioned, Medicare retirees were thrown out of the PEB system in 2011. As a result, Medicare retirees at that time left money in the PEB budget. And on an ongoing basis, Medicare retirees save the state millions of dollars every year. PEB no longer pays any claims whatsoever for Medicare retirees. The state appropriates more money for Medicare retirees than flows back to them. And so each year, the Medicare employees, retirees, leave money in the state budget, and we get no other benefit from the state. And so to reduce the employer contribution from 13 to 11 and really reduce at the most vulnerable stage of a retiree's life, the life insurance is really a very bitter pill to swallow. So I thank you for the opportunity to testify. Thank you.
And thank you for providing public comment. Broadcast, if we could please go to the next member of the public wishing to speak.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 837. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good morning, Chair Flores and committee members. This is Kent Irvin, Kentervin, representing the Nevada Faculty Alliance, the independent association of NSHE faculty statewide. The independence of the PEB board is a policy concern for the legislature and the Committee on Government Affairs this session because the recommendations and priorities of the PEB board on plan design decisions were overridden in the executive budget. My submitted written comments provide additional details. In the 1999 session, SB 544 created the PEB board to replace an advisory committee on benefits within the Department of Administration. That was after a scandal in the earlier 1990s when the contracted third-party administrator stopped paying healthcare claims and the legislature had to bail out the program. The 1999 legislature saw fit to give the PEB board the full authority to run the program on behalf of participants. The board is required to have expertise in benefits program, and board members serve as fiduciaries to participants and the program. When they were required to make the very deep 12% budget cuts in November, the PEB board made those difficult decisions to reduce medical payments, increase employee premiums, and they trimmed but did not eliminate life insurance and long-term disability insurance. Fortunately, the governor's executive budget reduced those cuts to PEB by about half, which is greatly appreciated. But in a departure from 2 decades of allowing the PEB board to make difficult plan design decisions in the best interest of participants, GovRec went against the priorities of the board and it completely eliminates the long-term disability insurance benefit, which, as you've heard, is the essential safety net for a state employee who becomes disabled. Now we can only hope that the budget committees will find funds to restore long-term disability insurance for state employees. As the policy committee overseeing PEB, the Government Affairs Committee should consider now whether the statute and NRS 287 establishing the PEB board with the authority over plan design need to be strengthened. Thank you very much for your attention to these matters.
And thank you, sir, for your comments. And we did get an opportunity to see your written testimony that was sent in. So thank you for that. Broadcast, if we could please go to the next member of the public wishing to speak.
Chair, the line is open and working, but there are no more callers at this time.
I want to thank those members of the public who had an opportunity to speak today. Thank you for doing that. This is your place to be heard, and it's our obligation to listen. So I appreciate you participating in this process. With that, members, I don't think we have anything else on the agenda. However, I do know that obviously several members of the public brought up issues specifically referring to PEB, and I believe we still have our executive director on the line, Laura Rich. I don't know if you wish to address any of those concerns, but in the interest of maybe avoiding a back and forth, or because we won't have given the opportunity those in the public comment to do that, maybe what we could do is I ask that if you had an opportunity to listen to that testimony, that you provide anything in writing for the entire committee to entertain and look at. And I did commit to allowing Assemblywoman Anderson, if I could have our executive officer, Laura Rich, come back just to ask a quick follow-up question. Broadcast, I don't know if she's still on.
Chair Flores, this is Laura Rich. I'm here.
I appreciate your flexibility, and though this is not normal that we would come back, I did commit to Assemblywoman Anderson. I believe she had a follow-up question that we didn't get addressed. Assemblywoman Anderson, please.
Thank you, Chair Flores, and thank you, Ms. Rich, for allowing that. Some of the testimony that was brought up, in particular, Dr. Nauman's, were there other discussions or considerations as opposed to completely getting rid of the long-term disability? Has there been any consideration of decreasing the amount instead? And or is that accurate that we realize that the PEB board is advisory, but was the impression given that they could not vote against it, of the governor's recommendations?
For the record, Laura Rich, at the November board meeting, based on the 12% budget proposals that the program had to come up with and submit to the governor's finance office, yes, the board chose to not eliminate long-term disability completely and instead reduce it. And like I mentioned earlier, everything in our program is levers. You take away one thing, you add one thing, you have to take it away from somewhere else. And so the result of that were the premiums were going to be significantly higher. And so we're out-of-pocket expenses and deductibles and things like that. So everything comes at a cost. And I'm happy to share this information with you and give you more of a detailed response as to what happens if you do this or if you do that. But definitely everything that is done comes, if you want to add something back, you have to take something else away. And I think the governor's recommended budget focuses on keeping those premiums stable so that there's no increases or significant increases to PEB members. And then also keeping that first dollar coverage, anything that could present a barrier. So a deductible, for example, if you're on the CDHP, that deductible today is $1,500. The plan does not pay anything until you have met that $1,500 deductible. That can be quite a burden on folks if you raise that even to, I believe the level was 2,000 that was presented or approved at the November board meeting. So again, there was, yes, if those benefits are reinstated, you have to then reduce other benefits, and it's what benefits would, there's that question. Hopefully that explains it.
It did, thank you. And was it basically presented that this is the governor's recommendation and it's this or nothing at all? Is the other question, but I understand that there's many more nuances to that as well, so we could have that conversation offline if you like.
And again, Ms. Rich, I appreciate you staying on the call and coming back. I do encourage you to please, if you'd like to provide any additional material to the members in writing in response to anything that may have been brought up during public comment, that you give yourself an opportunity to do that. If you find it prudent and necessary to clarify if there was anything that you believe was not fully stated and or there's a different perspective. So with that, members, I appreciate everybody's participation and attentiveness in this conversation. Having nothing before this committee, I would like to adjourn in honor of our Sergeant of Arms, Mr. Robin Bates, somebody who a lot of people in this building saw both as family and as a role model, somebody who set an example for so many people. I do this respectfully with the utmost respect for the family and those of you who may not have the blood connection, but also saw him as family for generations to come, and just an example on how to conduct yourself and how to operate yourself in such a professional, respectful manner. It was a tremendous loss for this building. So with that, we will adjourn in his honor. Members will be back here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. This meeting's adjourned.